I'll open it up to questions. I would ask if you have on-topic questions, if they're for me or for Leader Barclay or for any one of the members who spoke, please, direct your question or point out who you want it directed to, and then we'll do on-topic first and then off-topic.
For you, Leader, speaking of the budget, if this doesn't get done in the budget, do you think it has life in the subsequent few weeks left in session? And outside of that, do you feel like there should have been conversations earlier on? The 10-point plan just came out this month. Do you think we should have had that maybe back in January so there was more time to negotiate?
I wish you were in the Senate. It's all good points and questions. So with regard to, I'll do the second part, then I'll go to the first part. Look, the way this was sort of put out there, I think lends a lot of question about the sincerity of the governor and the lieutenant governor around this issue. It was leaked out to a publication, New York Post. Initially, the governor denied, wouldn't defend the plan, wouldn't even take credit for it. And then after the questions didn't stop, they sort of said, yeah, this is our plan. But she could have put it in her budget in January. She didn't. She could have put it in the 30-day amendments. Those are the things that you forget. There's a lot of things in the budget. She could have said, I'm going to put it in my 30-day amendment. She didn't. She could have had a big press conference saying, we need to do something about this. She didn't. So I just question the sincerity and the effort from her office. If she can't defend her plan, if she can't articulate why it needs to happen, why would her colleagues in the legislature, who passed bail reform, why would they go along with it, right? So, we'll find out here in a couple days. But yes, I think this would have had a better chance, would have been viewed as a more serious policy proposal had she done it through the budget or in the 30-day amendments. She did not. Once we get on the other side of the budget, I never want to say never, it gets immeasurably more difficult to get something like this done. And that's not even just a partisan statement. I think for those of us that have been here know, the budget is for the governor. She's the one pushing it. Let it be clear, my colleagues in the legislature, they are not, the majorities in the legislature are not the ones who are advocating for changes. This is solely because the governor put this forward. So once the budget's passed, she loses a lot of leverage politically, and I think it'll be even more difficult if she can't get it done in the next, couple hours, a couple days. As far as, what was the first?
That was it.
That was it, okay. All right.
Well done.
All right. Josh.
And this is for anyone that want to jump in. I think about half the violent felony rearrests are in cases in which judges have discretion to set bail, and judges set bail about a third of the time regardless of whether they have discretion or not. Can anyone comment on whether judges should be setting bail more often when they do have that discretion, and what your party or what folks up here would like to see in those instances? I understand the least.
Sure. Yeah. No, I would like to maybe have a DA comment on that because I think they are probably better positioned to address that if they so choose. I would say that I absolutely think they should be setting bail more. But I think part of what we've seen, and I'll take a broad brush on this real quick, what we've seen with the bail and discovery laws is there's the changes that they made in statute, but there are changes that have, it has affected the way police arrests they make, and it also has changed DAs, how they do their job, as well as judges. It has, I think, caused them to be concerned about, if I set bail, will I be accused of only setting bail, will I be accused of being a racist? Will I be accused of things that I don't, as a judge, want to do? And so I think the one sort of downside of not having judges involved at the outset, not having DAs, not having police officers, is I think some of those issues could have been, we could have heard directly from them, how will this impact you? How will this change the way you might look at your job? How will this change the way you may do your job? And I think that is something we have seen across the board, and I have heard from judges, DAs, and members of law enforcement. But I would absolutely say yes to your question, but I don't know if there's a district attorney or a police sheriff that might be able to speak more articulately than I did.
You don't know me, I'll never pass that on to speak. I think you answered your question with what you said at the very end as you were trailing off. The way the bail statute works now is there's a very formulaic question first. can the judge consider, but the most important piece and the most limiting piece is the phrase you started to say, which is the least restrictive means possible to ensure attendance at court. Has nothing to do with the strength of the case, has nothing to do with the record for the most part, has nothing to do with danger to the community or recidivism. It simply looks at if that person has never missed a day in court, regardless of the violence they've perpetrated, the statute directs the judge to basically release the person, maybe with some reporting, but remember the available reporting and oversight in the state is grossly limited by resources. New York City, far more resources for alternatives to incarceration. Other parts of the state, maybe a lot less. So I think the key is that least restrictive means piece. It looks solely at return to court, which is not the only concern relative to public safety.
Can I ask while you're up there, Danny, just for DA Ortt and any other law enforcement groups, just to confirm, has the Hochul administration tried to engage you at all during this hospital testimony?
So at the beginning of session, yes, with the 10-point plan, that was released a week and a half ago. We remain optimistic that this week we will have meetings. They've been scheduled. We'll see where that goes. So it's critical that we do it now. For anyone who's been around knows the value of the budget process. And so we remain cautiously optimistic, or just I'm a Pollyanna hopeful. So.
Also, for either or any of the DAs, discovery is not something that's a part of the plan from the governor. Is there something specific that you'd like to see, whether it be completely reverting back to the original system, or just a tweak of what we have now to lighten your workload? Or is it funding, maybe?
Well, good news is there is a component in her plan that does address budget. That was part of her 10-point plan that addresses some of these concerns. No, we don't want to go back to where we were. The reality is I'm not aware of any DA offices that complied with the old statute. So that ought to suggest we should change it, meaning in terms of timing. So yeah, I think what we have to do is find a way, one, fund it, you put your money where your mouth is, and two, provide some reasonable approach that our law enforcement partners can spend time not only gathering the evidence in a deliverable method and fashion, but also continue to protect our streets. And that's where we continue to see a challenge. So.
Is the deadline reasonable in your opinion?
It's not appropriate when you consider 20 days after arraignment, when trials are 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 18 months later, not due to anything on our side, but it's the timing of getting it to defense so that they can have appropriate time to review it. But I don't see where 20 days after arraignment or 30 days after arraignment makes sense.
And we've also heard locally that only about 5% of cases go to trial, so it was an exponential increase in workload. From your offices, do those numbers check out in a similar way?
I might suggest astronomical would be the only change, but when you do go from that, and not only is it the number of cases, but it's the timeline. And the cost is law enforcement on the street. At the end of the day, most of our law enforcement agencies consist of a handful of officers, and if they're gathering and producing discovery, they're not out checking on elderly folks. They're not out protecting individuals on the streets, and that's been a huge, huge cost that we see across the state. Thank you.
Nice, good job. Any other on-topic questions? Are there any off-topic questions?
Two questions, Senator. One on the bills. Just wondering what your comments are in terms of the release that the governor put out today about funding of the Bill Stadium.
Oh.
And then.
I thought you were asking about Von Miller.
And then the second piece is about a former governor, and Rich Hester Party just put out a statement saying that the Siena poll affirms that people are willing to give them a chance. Just your thoughts on that?
It's good to see Rich as a party still working. Look, on the Bill Stadium, I have only seen what's been obviously reported in the media, broad strokes. I still would like to sort of hold a little bit of my comments till I've seen bill text, because I think there's some specific details in there that need to be known that aren't known at this point. I'll say two things. One, I'm glad. Look, I've been very open about this. I want the Bills to stay in Buffalo. I want the Bills, therefore, to stay in New York. I think the identity of Western New York and the Buffalo Bills is It is linked. You cannot divorce the Buffalo Bills. It is not a small thing to think, the Bills leave. What's really the downside to the state of New York or to Western New York? It is significant in a host of ways, both economic and otherwise. So I'm glad to see that a deal seems like it's going to get done. There was never going to be a deal that didn't include public dollars. I think everyone knew that. And I think those public dollars do need to be scrutinized and questions need to be asked. And we'll see where this falls in the budget, where it's sort of slotted. But I also think it's important to note that the commitment from the Pegulas, when they bought the Bills several years ago, they bought the Bills to prevent Bon Jovi essentially from moving them to Toronto. That was a real concern. They bought the Bills and they made a commitment then to keep the Bills in Buffalo. And their commitment financially and otherwise, I think, is an important piece of this deal, both to the community, but also to the state when you look at the deal overall. So, but I still would like to see, I've not seen anything. I would like to, I'm hopeful to have conversations myself with the folks at PSE. Up to this point, all these discussions have been had outside of the public view, right? They've been had between the governor and the folks from Pagula Sports and Entertainment. I think it's important that legislative leaders, myself, Leader Barclay, also get a chance to have dialogue with PSE, before this comes to a vote, to ask them questions and to be able to sort of hear certain things from them. I think that should be a part of this before we vote on any final deal. Yeah.
Rob did a great job on the bills. I'll talk about Cuomo,
Oh, yeah.
if I may. Take you back down memory lane. We're here talking about bail reform. Who advocated and signed the bail reform law into place? Former Governor Cuomo. Who made $5.2 million on a book deal during the height of the pandemic about his terrific leadership during that pandemic? Who, through executive order or executive doctrine, whatever, he sent COVID-positive patients into nursing homes, resulting in thousands and thousands of deaths. So he wants to get back in the race? I say, come on, we'll review your record. Come on in. It's not going to be a pretty sight. And, we have great, not to get partisan, we have great candidates on our side of the aisle. We have a great candidate with Lee Zeldin. And he said the other day, if Cuomo gets in the race, it's going to be great because that'll make me win by an even wider margin. So jump out in the pool, Governor Cuomo. We're waiting for you.
On the gas tax situation right now, there's been some, Governor Hochul has said that there is some discussion about some relief on gas prices. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to see gas taxes capped, suspended, or some people talk about like a rebate where people get like a check for a car in their house?
I think you get too cute by half on this. It just doesn't have the effect that we need. I think New Yorkers need immediate relief, which is why the suspension, I think, is what is needed at this moment. You're talking about some of the highest gas prices I've ever seen in my lifetime, 42 years. And you know what? I'm fortunate. I can absorb it. There's a lot of my constituents who cannot. There's a lot of my constituents who this is the difference between paying their electric bill or putting enough gas in their car. And when the comment back is buy an electric car, I've looked at electric cars. You know what they cost? They cost a lot of money. And I think that shows how out of touch some of my colleagues are when it comes to this issue. And I think the other point, Nick, that I would add is that, instead of they're having dialogue, do they do a rebate? Do they do a holiday? There's a bill out there sponsored by Senator Parker that would actually increase the gas tax by 55 cents a gallon. That's still a real bill. That's their solution. Their solution is to make it worse, or at least one of their solutions is to make it worse. So this should not be real hard, in my view. When you look at what New Yorkers are paying and the impact that's having on people's bottom lines, this is the kitchen table issue of kitchen table issue. People are, they They are spending more, and there's no sense that it's going to go down anytime soon. So let's stop with the, do we make a rebate? We could screw up a one-car funeral sometimes here in Albany. Let's just suspend the gas tax, and let's give people relief immediately. Let's not mess around with this. Let's send them a message. We hear what you're saying. We feel your pain on this issue, and we know it's a problem. And if they don't, that's a real missed opportunity, because that has to happen, in my view, in the budget, because there's obviously a fiscal impact to that.
Great. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Given the apparent movement from lieutenant governors, either one, should the SAM money in this year's budget be like it has in the past, or should we be looking at changes based on?
Well, this is not a new issue down here. I think we're open to anything to keep elected officials honest. You would hope with all the oversight, all the laws we have, that elected officials would be in it, not to help themselves, but to do what's right for the public. So I can't speak for the Senate Republicans, but I could speak for our Congress. I think we're open to anything to make sure that it doesn't happen again, but we need to have a full investigation of what happened here with the Lieutenant Governor. I hope that proceeds. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.